Frequency matters. Frequency matters. Hello, and welcome to the Frequency Matters podcast. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Today we have our guest today is Nicholas Antone. Hi, Nicholas.
Hello.
Thanks for being on the show today. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for asking. Nicholas is a songwriter and producer from Cincinnati, Ohio, and operates under the name Nichetone. His music can be described as an
amalgamation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Of various alternative world folk and electronic sounds.
Yes.
Currently, he's working up with an up-and-coming artist, Lacinda Sue, on a track, Follow the Feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Super excited. I heard a little clip of it, and
Yeah.
I think it's going to be absolutely beautiful.
Awesome.
So that track, it sounds like the two of you are going to co-release that this single in late March, early April of this year.
Yep.
Very exciting.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it for sure. It's been a cool process. I've never worked with Lacinda on a song before, and it's always, I think, interesting to see how you work with somebody differently creatively in a new space, and how you operate differently with things. And we know that for sure since we've worked together creatively in the past.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been really cool for the song itself, and also just the learning process of that too.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So Nicholas and I go back a couple years. We first met at Ecstatic Dance at a time in my life where I was just exploring my authentic expression. And it was all kind of new to me at that time, but I found this beautiful, safe space and community, and that's where we met. And from there, I had felt a call at that time to record some of my tuning forks, and so I had asked Nicholas if he could help me learn how to do that. And so he got together and walked me through Audacity at the time, which was all kind of like foreign language for me. And then you had a little excursion off to China.
I did. Yeah.
So talk about your path, and then I'd love to come back to our process and how we co-created music and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely a very big question.
Right.
Musically, I have started playing guitar when I was 10 years old. Can't really say I took it like super seriously. I was taking lessons at the time, and was just learning all like the classic rock covers that you do, like Ozzy Osbourne, Led Zeppelin, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it was always something that I didn't really take super seriously, but always loved to do it. And then I feel like starting probably around the time that we met at Ecstatic Dance in 2017 was when I started going to various open mics and things like that and playing. And so started off more on the songwriting front than producing. And then right around that time as well, got into Pro Tools software and trying to learn, like what it's like to get a microphone and record from home and do all that kind of stuff. And released a small little EP that year. Had some songs on it like Follow the Wind, which is one that I like to play live a lot.
I'm a big fan of that song.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, that was one that we played together as a Language of Light collective down at this yoga festival. It was a lot of fun getting to do that for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, going to China could be like a whole podcast in and of itself. Basically, it was a time in my life that I was looking for some exploration, and went very, very far. and realized that I kind of needed to take a step back to heal a little bit in various different ways. So interestingly enough, yeah, went to China, was supposed to go there for a whole year to teach English, but after about a month was sort of like, it's not for me, and was ready to come back home. And it was probably, it probably wasn't even more than a week or 2 weeks that I feel like, I don't remember who reached out to who between us, but the idea of just collaborating on making some music with the guitar kind of stuff that I was doing in the singing bowls that you had just
Yeah.
kind of came up. And yeah, I remember that whole winter and spring in the process of just feeling more in myself and back in my body was also that process of we were collaborating on this meditative music. And yeah, so how Frequency Matters got started within that, I think will always hold like a special memory in my heart and time. And yeah.
Yeah, so I'm super honored to have you on the show. Obviously, the name of the podcast is the Frequency Matters Podcast. That has become my business name. But before it was any of that, it was the name that we created music under. So
Mm-hmm.
for our listeners out there, we have two albums with kind of one bootleg,
Yeah.
maybe two actually on Bandcamp,
Yeah, yeah.
with just collaboration with other artists. But I've so much enjoyed collaborating with you, and our process, I think, has been a really unique. I mean, I've never produced music. I've never really created music with others, and so when I first started playing, and really being around the community that we had come across in our lives at
Mm,
that time, everybody was very musically talented.
mm,
And a lot of the songs we just jamming around a campfire or in a basement. And I remember thinking like this song is made up on the spot. It's complete improv, and everyone is in their own unique strength and wheelhouse. And somehow it's coming together to just be this magical energy, this just beautiful thing. And I'm like,
mm.
we may never play this song again, or I may never hear
Yeah.
this again. So I
Yeah.
remember thinking, like, we're going to record every time we get together and play, we're going to record it. And I think
Yeah.
that was kind of a different mindset from a lot of musicians out there.
Yeah.
So, talk about, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about how our process of creating
Mm,
music is different than other musicians that you've worked with, and maybe how that's inspired a different
mm.
path in the future
Yeah.
or not.
I feel like, yeah, I got to bring that to honestly back to Marielle McIntosh, because like the first night that I met Marielle was at like a potluck. I think it was maybe like the week before that ecstatic dance, which was funny because it was like I met her and Nicole there, and then like we showed up to it and it was like, oh, you go to this thing too. But I specifically remember being around a group of people that night, and some musicians, some not musicians. And so I was definitely used to being in the space of, kind of like playing music, instrumental stuff, and improving, and however things kind of flowed. But Marielle was there that night, and Marielle was singing things and was singing words on the spot. And there was something about that just kind of like, I don't know, it sort of blew my mind, because it was like she was so carefree with it. And it was like, oh, you're allowed to do that. And like, you're allowed to have a meaning with it or not have a meaning. You can just sing and express yourself in that moment. And it was like, oh, this is really, really cool. So I think just that overall sentiment, at least that night, and then moving forward as a musician, does make you realize, like, even as I was kind of talking earlier with guitar lessons, and you kind of like have these songs that are established and you learn them and you play them, like there's a whole there's just a whole other world of what can you create when you give yourself the freedom to improv on the spot and not be fixated on what the outcome is or how you're sounding, if you're sounding perfect or not sounding perfect. And yeah, so that, in what we did with improv with our kind of larger group of friends and into Frequency Matters, the sentiment I think was a lot the same. You know, we didn't have like vocals going besides those bootleg kind of albums that Marielle is on.
Hmm.
But just our process of we're gonna, you know, take some deep breaths and chill out and get in this space of like, let's just allow whatever is gonna flow to like come through. And yeah, I mean, I feel like all of our music was improv in that way, and it was all spontaneous. And I feel like since you live further away from where I do, we would just have times where we'd record for like 2 hours, and that would be 4 songs that would be like, okay, that's 4 songs that we got done, and move the process along there, which was really cool. Um, so yeah, I really appreciated that process a lot. And, you know, I think we did that for those 2 albums. And when, you know, I kind of got busier with work and things like that, to try to change our process was something that we were exploring. But it was almost like there's something about the improv of this that like that's what the music of Frequency Matters kind of is, I think. And
Hmm.
so yeah, definitely, as yeah, just to sum that up as a general thing, improv versus more calculated things thought beforehand. I think every musician and just creative in general like should explore that territory, because I think that's where some good magic is.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Yeah.
I think that when you say just any artistic expression, because that's a lot of what, when I was first exploring my creative expression through art,
Hmm.
it was really trying to get out of my own head and my own mind
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
just enjoy the process rather than focusing on that end product and what it was going to look like. And
Mm-hmm.
abstract art really allowed me to do that. And so I very much appreciate that flow and getting into like, well, what wants to be created tonight? And
Mm-hmm.
that kind of process was kind of what set the stage for my sound healing sessions and
Mm-hmm.
my sound baths. And then when we would create music together, because we would always set an intention
Mm-hmm.
and we would always kind of walk through a grounding meditation where we would connect to the earth and connect to creator, and then just from that space allow ourselves, our hands, to be moved
Mm-hmm.
and allow the frequencies or the whatever magic wanted to come through. We were open to it at that time and anchored in an intention.
Yeah.
So we had the name of our song from before it was ever created. We would
Mm-hmm.
say this song is for peace of the
Mm-hmm.
suffering or whatever, for example. And then we
Yeah.
would just play and let that emotion or that intention move us. And I just think
Mm-hmm.
that that whole process was really beautiful and powerful. And then taking it to the next level when we would put music videos out there,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was just amazing because I already had taken all these pictures and videos for like years, being
Mm-hmm.
out in nature. And whenever I'd feel like inspired by the sunlight or the way it hits the water, and I'd take a video of that. And my husband used to laugh, like, what in the world are you going to do with all thousands of pictures of the
Right.
sun? I'm like, I don't know. But then one day it was like, oh my gosh, like I know
Yeah.
why I took all these pictures and these
Yeah.
videos.
Yeah.
And they just so perfectly went so effortlessly with our
Mm-hmm.
music that it was just like, and honestly, that's how I feel like our music created itself in a way,
Yeah.
because it was so natural and so free flowing. We didn't
Mm-hmm.
really have to try, we just had to show up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I feel that when I listen to the music, that it moves me and it helps me get out of my own headspace whenever I'm
Mm-hmm.
working around the house or doing something I really don't want to do. If I'm feeling that resistance and I put on Frequency Matters album, I just find myself in this beautiful flow state, and it becomes effortless.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. That's definitely super, super powerful. Um, yeah, I like what you said about not feeling like you have to try is the big thing for sure. Just letting everything flow as it needs to. And it's weird because you can be in those spaces and feel like, you know, that that there is still a force, and that sometimes like it almost like I feel like when I get into those spaces, um like sometimes there's a feeling of like, oh, I've completely surrendered to this improv and flow, and then be like, but the mind creeps in like a little bit too much, and then it's like it's just a continual kind of thing. But I feel like when you finally get there, it's just like a point where it's like, yep, I'm not doing this anymore. It's happening and I'm part of it. And it's like it's just such a blissful feeling. And it can be in all aspects of life, just that, yeah, that observer behind everything kind of feeling. And
Mm.
yeah. And to kind of segue into some of the stuff I've been making recently, because my process has changed a whole lot in the sense that I'm basically doing what I feel like is the complete opposite and still trying to find that flow within that, which has been a
Okay,
very interesting kind of thing.
cool.
But yeah, when you're making music, especially if it's like by yourself, even with your collaborating with people, if you're focusing on, how am I going to put this like arrangement together for an entire song, or like this is the verse or this is the chorus for this thing, things can become, I guess, a little bit more analytical, or like feeling that way, or just sort of like, traditionally this is what songs do. And so this is going in this direction and I'm kind of going to like follow this flow. Um, so yeah, even within that, I've been trying to still find ways of being able to improv and go with the flow with things. Um, but yeah, surrendering to just like finding flow, I guess, like in very analytical things, or being able to be like I'm going to try to find flow in this. Like maybe I'm trying to write like a drum part or something, and I'm going to find flow in this by being very analytical and being like, I'm going to write 3 drum parts. And like in the process of these 3 parts, I've like put bounds on the number and like the specific thing I'm trying to do, but I'm open to like the options of which of these am I going to pick, like kind of at the end sort of thing. And that sort of, I feel like, takes away from the fear a little bit sometimes, especially, which is, it's like a weird thing in a modern age too, with like, we can record an infinite number of times. Like there's no, especially people recording at home and that aren't really on like a budget of going to a studio and having to like pay an engineer or something. We can record as much as we want, but like there's still this inherent, like when you hit this record button, it's just like and like everything freezes and you feel like you don't know what you're doing. And so I think to kind of like be more analytical about it and be like, okay, you're going to do this 4 times, and not think about like, is this limited, is this one good versus this one. It's just like you're going to focus on that you're doing it for this many times. And so learning that, like, I wouldn't say that's necessarily an improv kind of thing. It almost feels like overly structured, but finding that there can be different ways of flow and like lots of structure too has been a very cool thing lately.
I like that. That's cool.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of the, it sounds like it takes a lot of the pressure out of that it
Mm-hmm.
has to be a certain way, or like you said, it's not good enough, or it has to be perfect. It's
Yeah.
like that gives you just choices
Mm-hmm.
and like just many variations and options and the ability to layer and bring
Yeah.
one in, cut one out, and whenever
Yeah.
it feels like it flows.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
So is that you said that's the kind of like music that you've been focusing on lately?
For sure. Yeah.
It's
Just
been
the idea of like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, just that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely lately has been more of the structured, planned out kind of vibe for sure.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you've had a couple songs that you've released recently.
Mm-hmm.
What was inspiration behind, like, where do you get a lot of your inspiration from?
Um, so that's where um I try to stay open. I try to, even if I'm not in the space of complete improv, like how we were kind of talking about before with frequency matters, I do try to, at least when ideas are starting, to always be in a space of like openness to where it can go, and throughout the entire process of it too. But it does get to a certain point where you kind of have to like put form around the thing and be like, this is the title of it and that sort of thing. I will say I do like to, just from more of a black and white thing. Like I definitely start with music first for things, always kind of like letting that be a guide. Um, because I'm very much comfortable in the space that feeling like not every song does need words. Like things can be instrumental if they want to be that way. Um, so starting with music and then coming from a place where if lyrics and themes and things are being added, that almost like I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like for me, title is like always the very, very last thing that
Mm,
kind of like comes to my mind with music because the times that I have tried to like write a song and I'm already like, this is the title of what it is, like it's another constraint that helps to ground things. But it also, I feel like, can be limiting because it can be this thing of like, well, I'm going to write a song called Fear. And then it's like, so if I start in this place of, okay, fear, and then all the words I'm thinking about are words that are like related to fear. And for whatever reason, that feels like it limits me versus like, I'm going to write from a place of fear, not necessarily know that I'm there, but I'm just kind of like writing and expressing. And then later maybe be like, oh, this has themes of like fear in it. And that could like be a title or something like that. But I try to always, I guess, in my process stay like open to where does this want to go and never trying to be too like you feel it with art when you're trying to like strangle something and hold on to it and it's
mm,
just like but it's always that thing of like each project to me feels like it's like a different kind of thing I think I'd say
yeah,
yeah
cool, cool. I know when we've played together live in the past, I have always felt like you've done a really good job of um, like translating the energy of the room and
mm,
bringing in people's emotions and your own emotions into a musical flow, which I
mm.
think is really a gift.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I definitely feel that sometimes it's not something that I try to like because yeah, it can't be a thinking thing. It has to just be like a feeling kind of thing. I will say though, I have thought about that in the sense that sometimes writing music that is my own, especially music that's my own and has my own lyrics and things like that, can be harder or like more intimidating to kind of finish. On one aspect of just like, you know, every artist has self-conscious like, should I even be saying anything at all kind of thing that comes up. But beyond that, sometimes yeah like if you're on an emotion for a song that feels like this is a hard emotion or an emotion I don't really want to explore to like consciously put yourself not necessarily in that emotional state but at least that you're almost consciously like letting those things out or like come up and there's I don't know like somewhat of a pain in it I guess you could say um to where like you don't really want to or you can get like glimpses of it but if you go into it too deeply you're just like yeah I don't want to deal with all that or I was just like having a day and I want to like have time to make art and not be therapeutic it is all therapeutic at the end I feel like but sometimes those harder things that I think want to come out more I can struggle with like following through on those but I've tried to like flip that on its head lately and be like yeah if the thing that hurts more to come out is the thing that wants to come out more. So it's like just go head on into that. And you're always going to be safe with it. It doesn't feel like it, but you will be. But yeah, emotions and music like they can't be separated. They're like the same thing, I think.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So when we played together, you tune
Mhm.
your guitar to 432 hertz to harmonize
Mhm.
with the singing bowls. When we played when we played the Language of Light Collective
Mhm.
at the Kentucky Yoga Festival, there was a set that there was like how many of us? Seven, eight,
8
9.
anywhere from 8 to 15 people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a really amazing and magical
Yeah.
experience because we had about 3 months to take everybody's songs and learn them. And then part of the set, we played a 3 hour set. Part of the
Mhm.
set, strings were tuned to 432 hertz to
Mm-hmm.
harmonize with the bowls, and then there were other songs that were a little more jammy with drums and such, and then the singing bowls didn't seem to, they kind of were drowned out by that.
Mm.
But I always thought it was a really powerful experience to listen to a whole collective in 432 hertz from my perspective.
Mm.
Um, from your perspective, do you feel the music any differently? I know we've talked about it a lot before, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, um, your thoughts.
Yeah. So I would say that I do, and I know that we come at that from a different place. Like I feel it differently in the sense that yeah, I'm not huge on 432 being like any kind of specific sort of thing versus other frequencies, and I know we've talked about that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um but what I think is interesting that I feel like I've also told you before is that the simple act of taking something that is 440 and like kind of shifting it to 432 um, is interesting in that things are standard 440. And so naturally, by taking that and changing it to 432, um, since so like if you think of two notes on a piano, if you're going from um, A is 440 to 432, it's not quite a whole like note on the piano. It really would be like closer to a half or more of like 3/4 of a note. So like a key doesn't really exist on the piano for that. Um, so in that sense, yeah, I find like there's kind of a, especially with my own songs, because and everybody else's too that we were doing for the yoga festival, like we're kind of used to playing those in a certain key and then dropping them just like slightly. It's kind of a cool thing. Like it gives it a warmth, and it gives it a warmth in a way that's not just changing the key necessarily, because if you were like changing the key, it would be as if you were changing a whole note on the piano. So naturally, yeah, there's going to be like overtones on notes and things like that that are not really mathematically happening um, if you change keys versus 432. So I think that is pretty cool. Um, Whether those things are like super, super perceptible to the human ears, maybe where we differ on that. But I definitely just feel like, yeah, I felt um, a slight difference there in lowering to 432. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
Now I know you've explored different tunings as well,
Mm.
so tell us about some of the other tunings that you've played around with.
Yeah. Definitely I'm gonna shout out Shanti Aries here because he's the master of various tunings as well. Yeah, on guitar, like not to get super like musical on it, but a fun thing to do if you're a guitarist or musician and you haven't explored it is just to kind of tune the strings like to your liking and just continually kind of play and see like what comes up for you. That's always a fun way to generate new song and riff ideas. It can kind of like stab you in the back if you come up with a random tuning and you like don't remember what it was, or like there's only one song out of your set of like 13 that you have like 4 or 5 different tunings on them. So there is, I guess, like a logistical aspect to try to keep things similar. Um, but yeah, I think exploring different keys and different tunes, it's kind of interesting as well. I don't know if you've seen, you're not on TikTok, are you?
I nope, I
Yeah.
try not to be. I mean, I
Yeah.
occasionally get the like YouTube shorts and the I mean, and
That's where I
I
see
have
him
some,
too.
yeah, Facebook Reels come up, but definitely
Mhm.
I stay away from TikTok.
Yeah.
But
It's
please
definitely an
share.
interest. Yeah. It's an interesting thing lately. And I feel like probably this happened a bunch when vinyl was more popular because like you could slow up and speed down the vinyl or whatever. But it's a big trend on TikTok from what I understand that people will either like speed up a song slightly or like slow it down slightly or like they'll like slow the pitch down and then they'll like put a bunch of reverb on a song or something like that. So I definitely think we're in an era where people are kind of exploring like, oh, this is what this sound is, but what does it sound like if you change it slightly, knowing like what the original one is? And it's kind of a cool space. I honestly think that Spotify in a couple of years will probably have some sort of function where you can do that, or you can like change the key of a song or move it, or you could probably like put song in 432 or something like that. So I think it's really interesting that humans are naturally just like they hear something and then they're like, but what if it sounded like that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So it's cool to see that's going on.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious. I know that you've done some, like I saw one of your videos that you did with the dog dancing on the
Oh yeah.
different
Yeah.
squares or whatever.
Uh-huh.
Um, how do you like, are you using a certain app to do that? Like, what tools do you use to like layer on these different videos? Because I've seen that and I think that's just so
Yeah.
cool that like artists and musicians are like building on top of things that they're creating. So it's like
Mhm.
12 different versions of them in one time, which obviously they didn't do it once, but because we have
Right.
this technology nowadays, it's possible and it's really
Mhm.
you could be like a one man band with 12 different parts.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That was like kind of the first video I did in that realm. Um, I honestly just like did very like it took a lot more work than like the 30 seconds or whatever that it
Oh, I
was. But
bet.
but yeah, I think I just downloaded the video and then interestingly, yeah, like the melody that the dog played was pretty sweet, I must say. And so there was already pretty much something there. And then I think I just had to like change the pitch of it slightly so that it would match like all together. Or there was like a part in the middle where there was more space. So if you just like cut out that space, then it's just like the dog playing or whatever. Um, but yeah, there's lots of tools, and I've been getting into sampling, which is kind of an old school hip hop thing, honestly. But there's lots of tools and audio things where it will take audio like that and it'll kind of like figure out what the BPM is, and it'll some of the stuff even will like chop up specific like transients of the audio for you to like kind of do things with it. Um, so yeah, just kind of taking that and then editing the video time wise to fit. And honestly, like I was so in the flow of it, I don't even know half of the things that I did. I kind of was just like trying to make it work. There's probably ways to make it work that are like faster than that too. But yeah, I think that it's cool. Instagram and TikTok and lots of those things. There's a lot of things on there that are a lot of fluff for sure and absorbing our time. Um, but there are so many, yeah, cool remixes that happen like if an artist releases a song they could have a remix, somebody could remix it and have it out in like an hour, just like crazy. So much is being created in such a short amount of time, and it's kind of cool, but yeah, we have to all be careful with it too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Mhm.
I saw one last night. I didn't even mean to, but I looked up a song, and then the next one that came up was a song that my kids have been playing just nonstop. But it's
Yeah.
the Ivy and Polka by the Kiffness.
Okay. Yeah, the Kifna, he's the guy that definitely
I'm like,
inspired me to kind of do that
oh my
thing.
gosh.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
he's
just
great.
like he's just sitting there with like a little keyboard popping out
Mhm.
little like beats and
Yep.
then and it's I mean clearly using like a looping pedal of some sort or some sort of
For that, no, I mean it's
no?
all like because it loops within the like audio that you're working with kind of a thing.
Okay.
And then yeah, you're basically just recording afterwards, like you playing the note there, kind of a thing. Because yeah, doing all that live would be super cool. But yeah, I would say most people doing those videos are definitely not doing them live. It's just kind of like more of the after
Yeah.
shot of what's going on there.
Well, then I thought what I thought was really cool on top of that was
Mm-hmm.
that there were people around the world that were joining in, and like
Yeah.
one girl got on and was playing a violin to the
Mm-hmm.
song, and then there's like another picture pops up and it's a woman playing the flute to that song.
Mm-hmm.
So this like people around the world collaborating in this way that's just like their own part,
Mm-hmm.
but when you add it to the whole song, sounds just so like incredible. And to think that like
Yeah.
we're able to collaborate like this, like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really, it's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. That's definitely I'm seeing a lot more. I've been trying to be a lot more active on my Instagram than Facebook lately. And it seems like Instagram is just very much that vibe of like people collaborating with each other and sending things. Also, from a production standpoint, lots of people are using samples of other people's things, and sample packs are very big to basically like be able to pay something like $5 a month and you can get background textures of sounds from people that are royalty free and that you can, license for whatever you want kind of thing. I've met random people on there and kind of connected, and then randomly one day I'm jamming and be like, I'm going to record like 6 chord progressions on guitar and send it to this person and see like if they want to just do anything with it, kind of a thing. And so I very much appreciate that amongst maybe music producers a little bit more than like songwriters, because with songwriting, and I get it, especially lyrics and things, people are a little bit more like guarded and like, this is very much my own thing. But everybody in the kind of more music production world is a lot more like, oh yeah, I want to use your snare drum on my song, and like you can use my loop of this on another song. And so it's really cool to see how that world operates for sure.
That's cool.
Yeah.
The theme of the podcast of Frequency Matters is people, brilliant people around the world doing really cool things in the field of sound and light frequencies in the impact on the human body.
Yeah.
I think that you are a brilliant person doing really cool things when it comes to sound frequencies. And I'm curious at what your perspective is, how that impacts the human.
Yeah.
Or how does it impact you?
Yeah, I think I feel like I definitely can't separate sounds like from music. I know that they are very different things. Like I just heard a car roll by. Hopefully you didn't hear the car roll by.
That's okay.
But it's honestly weird too, not to go off on another tangent, but like there are times when I'm making music too that I feel like I will be making a beat or something and a car rolls through, and it literally does feel like things have this like cadence to them that they didn't have before. But yeah, I would say like I definitely feel that, whether it's from a more scientific or spiritual or whatever, just the idea that like everything is vibrating all the time, I definitely feel like feels very true to me.
You said everything is vibrating. Is that what you said? Because it kind of cut out.
Yeah, everything is kind of vibrating just at one time. So yeah, when I think of sound, I just think of vibration, and trying to think of a little bit more to say on that, I guess. But yeah, I don't really I guess I think the way that sound can be relaxing, that sound can be frightening too, that sound can really be more pointed and have specific direction, is it's very interesting. And especially the way that things are going lately with, and I know that you have more expertise and knowledge and with the specifics of sound healing these days. um yeah, how I kind of want to ask you this question, because I feel like being on Frequency Matters podcast here, um how do you feel like within the past like 10 to 20 years, the idea of, I guess even just start like before that, like when when would you say the term of like sound healing specifically kind of like came more into the mainstream of society?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, it was, I feel like mainstream back in the ancient days. Like it
Mm,
was built, they had like sound chambers built into their temples.
mm,
And like they've found like specific parts inside the pyramids that had like incredible acoustics.
mm,
Um, the didgeridoo from it was Australia, but way back in the
yeah.
day, that was like the
Mm,
very first sound healing tool. I think back then it was just mainstream because we didn't have modern medicine the way we do today.
mm,
But I think that over time it has kind of become uh, less popular,
mm,
somewhat forgotten, like an ancient art.
mm,
And I think in the last probably 15 years, it's definitely been picking up. Um, I wouldn't necessarily say it's mainstream yet. I
yeah.
think a lot of people know about it more so than they
Mm,
did even 2 years ago. But
yeah.
I mean, my goal is to really bring it, and not, I don't think that this is something I can do single-handedly, but
Mm,
hopefully with this podcast and with other sound healers are also doing this all around the world,
Mm,
just bringing it to more mainstream places like corporations for their workplace wellness programs. I'd love
mhm,
to see it in schools. I feel like when we are seeing it in the hospitals, in schools,
mm.
in the workplace, that's when we'll really have like this mainstream um, breakthrough. And
Yeah.
I think that it's close. I feel like we haven't quite flipped into that yet, but more people
Mhm,
today are accepting of it than I've experienced in the past. When I first started playing my tuning forks, when I got my first set of tuning forks, I remember being like super shy about it, like
mm.
oh my gosh, I'm such a nerd. Like I would like hide them, I'd bring them out like I didn't really talk about it with anybody just because I felt like nobody's gonna understand. Well,
Yeah.
today I got to a point where I'm like, these are really cool and people need to hear it.
Mm.
And that's when I started being a little bit more bold about it. And that
Yeah.
was probably 2016, 2017.
Mhm,
Um, Honestly, maybe even 2015, because I started bringing them to a women's circle that I was co-creating back at that
mhm,
time. And we kind of had this like very safe, sacred container
mm.
where people were open to it. And I didn't feel
Yeah.
shy or shameful about it being really like different. And that
Yeah.
gave me the confidence to do it and talk about it and share it with others before I ever was able to do that, like to just the general population.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not sure if that
Yeah.
answers your question, but I think we're getting there.
No, yeah, it definitely does. Yeah. I think it's very interesting how, and I don't know if we want to go into that at all too, but how, yeah, the whole idea of what we were trying to do with bringing sound healing and music together with the music that we were playing, and like kind of how we found lots of flow in that, and maybe there are also struggles within it too from like both of our perspectives. If you have any thoughts on that.
Specifically, flow versus the struggles.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that by the process that we were creating with like a meditation first to really ground and connect,
Hmm.
put us into that flow, but then also brought us into that space of it could be very uncomfortable because we didn't know what was going to come through.
Mm.
And when the mind starts to creep in, you kind of have that dance of, shh, like it's fine, it's gonna be okay. Like
Yeah.
this like inner parenting, like
Hmm.
just relax, it's okay. But there was a lot of, I think fear that would come up and creep in, like especially playing live. Like, am I doing
Yeah.
this right? Are they resonating with this? And
Hmm.
do people like do they get it? Like, is this
Yeah.
are people connecting with it, or is this just like, because every sound bath that I've done up until probably the last year, people at the end would just be like so um, quiet, and
Hmm.
I now understand that to being like blissed out,
Yeah.
relaxed. But I would ask for feedback, and like nobody would really, they couldn't even talk. Like
Hmm.
people would just stare at me, and I'm like, okay. I mean, I think that's a good thing. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But until recently, I started asking, like, raise your hand if you feel more relaxed than when you got here. And
Hmm.
everybody, hands down, raises their hand. And so, like, that's enough for
Yeah.
me to be like, okay, like, people are not in a state to um, analyze what they've just been through,
Yeah.
process, and talk about it. And I feel like um, that was kind of the same with our music in the very beginning. It was
Hmm.
well received, but I think it wasn't really until we started involving the audience that
Hmm.
we could really feel how they were getting into it in their own way. And that was really magical. Like if you think back to our very first show at the yoga studio,
Hmm.
I think everybody was kind of like laying down or sitting down in the
Yeah.
beginning, and then when
Hmm.
we gave people permission to like move around, dance, flow,
Hmm.
play an instrument with us, the whole vibe changed, and
Yeah.
our vibe changed because of it. I think was we were
Hmm.
picking up on that energy as well. And
Yeah.
that was really cool.
Yeah.
It was like we were all co-creating that music, and I
Hmm.
think that they felt the audience felt that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when we sit in, like, there's been other shows that we've had, and people don't really feel, even though we've given permission for people to get up and move around, and
Hmm.
it's more of like a church setting, and
Yeah.
people are just kind of like sitting there. Some have their eyes closed,
Hmm.
mostly eyes closed, I'd say now.
Yeah.
But people aren't really getting up and moving, and it's hard to know, are they resonating? Where it feels like once they kind of are moving with the music, it feels like we're all co-creating this. Even though before we're maybe just picking up on their uncomfortableness, uh,
Yeah.
of their like the stiffness. Is this
Hmm.
safe? And I think that would come through in our music
Yeah.
versus when people are like walking around and dancing and playing together and just like more free flow. That comes
Hmm.
that comes through too. So it's like
Yeah.
because we're in that improv state, we're reading the energy and that's what's coming through.
Hmm.
So I think that's a interesting thing.
Yeah, definitely. I felt like it was cool to be in that space, and sometimes definitely some anxiety in that space too. Because even though like you said, yeah, we were kind of picking up on whatever energy was in the room. So even though we knew our process and like we're just gonna let this go where it goes, it was like if we're picking up on the energy in the room and there's a uncomfortableness or there's like a, and not even from a place of like a judgment of the sounds that we're making, but more of this place of like, this is kind of new. And like, I don't know what to do about this, or I don't know if there is more of a meditation or, and I think it's interesting the difference there because maybe with sound healing and music is musicians for sure are definitely super used to like playing in a loud room, playing in a room where people aren't necessarily listening, or you almost kind of use that like loudness of a room or a crowded bar. And when people are actually getting quiet, is that gauge of like, oh, this one's kind of working because people were quiet for a second in this loud bar, sort of a thing. But the opposite feels true with sound healing, where it's sort of like, I feel for it to work better, like the idea of having a silence kind of like facilitated and spoken of beforehand really does create that sort of space, especially because it does, like, music can be moving in so many ways, and there's so many songs that are moving and move emotions with people. But I don't think music necessarily has the same capacity that, like, if someone's just listening to singing bowls and laying down and really, really tuning in deep, especially to a place where, like, if they don't do that normally, you know, that can bring up so many different emotions and stuck things. And I think that's where a lot of this healing is. And so,
Yeah,
ideally, I think when it flowed the most, it almost felt like it was like there was sacred space for all of that to happen,
yeah,
and like it could. Um, but yeah, I think it can kind of be difficult to be in that space where you're like with a very powerful healing tool and way to tune into yourself. And then there's also kind of like a dance vibe going on too. Like, so I think I really appreciated that you know, we had a good experience with that first show for sure. And those at that yoga studio, but I appreciated that we always like, and not to say that we ever had a time where it was like we played and it was like, oh, that was weird or bad or anything. But I appreciated that we always like put ourselves in that place of like, I don't know how this is gonna go exactly. Like, we kind of know, but we were just kind of open to like the flow of it. And I think that's really cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think before those experiences in my life, I would have been very uncomfortable in that
Hmm.
space. And so having um, that freedom, like you talked about in the beginning, that freedom for creative expression in the moment,
Hmm.
um, and having you up there next to me kind of took some of that pressure off.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, everybody's staring at me. Like
Yeah.
like it was like I trusted in. our collective expression, that together we would create something that everybody needed. And I think
Yeah.
that honestly, that gave me a lot of confidence to do that by myself. And I don't know if I could
Mm.
have gotten to that place without those
Yeah.
experiences. So thank you
Hmm.
for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I totally agree. I think that the sound healing, it does bring up, if you have stuck emotions or unprocessed trauma, that
Hmm.
it can really rattle those emotions, those blockages.
Yeah.
And I think that um, we probably were picking up on that in some instances where people were like, I don't know if it's okay to move right now. Where I feel like
Hmm.
the movement is sometimes what helps that stuff kind of leave your body.
Yeah.
I feel like
Mm.
when I it's like a push pull kind of thing with sound baths, because everybody's laying down in such a relaxed state, and I feel like some people need to go really deep to get to that space to allow this stuff to come through. And I feel like I'm speaking directly to their cells or their DNA or something at that point,
Hmm.
where if they were conscious, more alert and awake, and moving, I'm not sure that they would get as much out of it. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it feels like there's this like time and space for both.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'll say for myself too, like I definitely noticed like um when we would play more often and when I was doing even like busking downtown, um, just yeah, my whole mindset as a musician kind of shifted from how we played because there'd be moments where it's like I have songs and I know I'm gonna do them and I know some are gonna like vibe more than others and people will respond more than others. And but there would just be these moments where it'd be like I would maybe be not feeling it, or I would have these like songs that I told myself I was gonna play, and then I'd be like, I don't really feel like I want to go to that like emotional state, or kind of like ride that roller coaster of like this song is more upbeat and then this next one's like not. Um, but I would find myself being in this place of like I'd be out there for like 2 hours at times and would be feeling this weird way, and then just kind of just like almost like pacify myself with some sort of like meditative music or like, and it feels very weird at first, especially like downtown on a street like cars going by, but it would be very interesting that like I felt like I could do that, and then that I wanted to just like stay in that place because sometimes I think like people might not understand, like some musicians definitely, like we all, we want to hear people clapping, we want to hear like, oh, that was a good job, like you want that reflection from people. But sometimes it just be in this place of like I'm I'm vibing and I'm with the space and others, and like we're all just riding this, and like let's just, we need the clapping, we don't need the, you know social cues of like this is how we need, like let's just like ride this thing and let it go. And that's where times when that happens just feels like there's such a breakthrough of just newness of like, you know music doesn't have to just be, a 3-minute pop song. And I love 3-minute pop songs. I like writing them too, but there's so much room for just like putting yourself intentionally in spaces with sound in so many different ways. And so I think when I was saying before, like, I appreciate you clarifying that. Yeah, sound healing specifically probably is not mainstream. I think that from just being around it and in that world. Um, but yeah, I think I'm seeing all kinds of things like that pop up, not necessarily with singing bowls lately, but just lots of musical artists being like, yeah, we're going to play specifically chill tunes for an hour and people can bring a pillow and meditate or sit along. And so I think that that vibe of performer, that was a whole other thing too, like performer and audience, how you were talking about how we had our audience kind of interact with us too. I think a lot of those things are kind of, we're not getting rid of completely of the old, we're all going to like, you know performing and artists and songs and intention with that. But I think that yeah, humanity's exploring a lot of like new ways with it, and I think that's really cool.
I do too. That actually gives
Yeah.
me goosebumps to think about, because I
Mm.
feel like one of the things that make us unique from other animals in the universe is that we have this ability to connect to each bring our own strengths and to collaborate and create something cooler than what we could have done on our own
Mm.
potentially,
Yeah.
because we have those different pieces that are coming together. And
Hmm.
I feel like as a humanity, we've never really been in that space. So we're just beginning to scratch the surface of what's possible and what that potential looks like when we are able to come into that space. Because I think in the past, we're very ego driven,
Mm.
and it's like everybody else is seen as competition, where it's like, no, I'm the star, or
Yeah.
I'm the lead, so you follow me, everybody stand behind me. Where I
Hmm.
feel like that paradigm is shifting, and
Yeah.
we don't need to be the star.
Hmm.
We are coming together to create something completely new. And
Yeah.
when you do bring the audience into it, I think that their experience of that isn't, it's completely different too.
Hmm.
And I think that that's exciting.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think also just too with um social media, like a thing I've been trying to do on Instagram to kind of like market a little bit is to any hashtag that I use like in a post of mine, I will, and typically they're like original music or music production or something like that. I'll like intentionally take time every single day. And this also helps limit like my time on these apps too by doing this. But I'll specifically be like, I'm going to take a half an hour or an hour and I'm going to click on the same hashtag that's on my post and go through and find others that are doing similar things. But the catch is like not to just go through and I'm going to like all these things and I'm going to be like, here's my name too, and just kind of throw it with the thing, but to genuinely be like, I scrolled through some posts that I didn't necessarily like, and I found this one and I liked it. And I intentionally put a comment of my own, like, this is why I liked this thing. And it's such a cool thing to see. Like, the reason I brought that up is because thinking of people that are like the star, or how you were saying that, like, there's so much more, I think, talented people today than there's ever been before because we have social media. And there's people that are doing things on social media that are like insane and groundbreaking that have like 10,000 followers, which, is a lot, but it's not like millions that other people have. And so we really are moving to this state where like I think there's always going to be famous people and there's always going to be people that like everybody kind of knows, but we're also in this state where it's like there's going to be lots of like different levels to it, and there's going to be people that like we admire that not everybody knows. And I think that it's cool to kind of like be in that state. And inherently I just see everybody becoming more creative, like on all levels and all things, and it's amazing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. I hope that that's the case. I pray that's the case, because I do fear with
Yeah.
so much content out there that
Yeah.
it could be very stifling at times to see. I
Mhm.
mean, if you're in that mindset of like, oh, I'm not doing enough, or
Yeah.
like it can get, you see other people out there that are doing great things, and it can get you
Yeah.
feeling down sometimes, and that will absolutely stunt the creativity, rather than
Yeah.
seeing like, look at all these things that people are doing, what can I
Mhm.
do, what can I, that's different, or what can I do, how can I add my own piece to this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think
Something that
that
I heard,
that's cool.
yeah, something I heard recently was I don't know if it was an artist or a musician, but they were kind of talking about a big struggle for a lot of artists is sort of that idea that it's like they look at everything that's out there and they kind of have this notion that like there's only a limited, amount that can go around. Like there can only be this many talented people, there can only be this many musicians or artists, and it's like no, we literally can all do cool things. And yeah, that means there's going to be, like I was saying, like less big people or famous people in that sense, but it's like that's what I think kept people for the longest time. And there are still shows like that, like American Idol or the X Factor, or things that are very focused on like you're going to be a star in this specific kind of way. But like a lot of that's stifling, and it's like there's a lot of people in life that never decided to pick up a paintbrush or an instrument because they saw a show like that and they were like, well, I could never do something like that.
Hmm.
And the fact that that shifted is just so cool. And I think I've been trying to do this too this year more specifically than last, is like the opposite of anxiety a lot of times is action. And
Mm,
so being in the space where you're like, comparing yourself to people, but in a healthy way, comparing yourself and being like, I love what this person does, but I recognize that they're doing this because they've put in work and they had discipline to like get to this level of doing this. And I'm not going to compare myself with where I am now because I'm not here, because I know that if I keep doing these things, then I'll go as far with it as I want to go. And I think if people have more of that aspect and less about the results, then
mm,
hopefully what they'll find in it is that like they actually just enjoy the making of it versus the external thing in the first place. It should just be a joy to do it in the first place.
yeah.
um but yeah, like I think even a lot of people too will go down that line and realize like you got to think, unfortunately, there's lots of people that have become bigger in their domains for their discipline and things, but they get burnt out on like they're not doing it from a genuine place anymore. And as an artist, like you don't want to be there either. So what can we do about social media? I do think there needs to be like more, and it needs to be spread out. Like the fact that we have these like overlords of like Instagram and Facebook, like only three, or like TikTok now, there's like three major kind of things and they own other things. And we're going to need to shift that up a little bit, I think. Um, but yeah, just the general idea that you can do cool things and show other people, I think is cool, and that you don't have to be like the best at it.
Yeah. Like we're
Yeah.
coming into a time where like anybody could be uh famous, and I think that's
Mhm.
so funny. My kids asked me like the last podcast interview that I had, they said,
Mhm.
"Mom, is he famous?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, I mean, how do you really define that anymore?" It's
Yeah.
like it's like probably among the people that know him.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we all are then in that
Yeah.
case. So, whether you have like 15 followers or 30,000 followers, you're famous
Mhm.
among the people that know you. So
Yeah.
it's like we don't need to operate in that world, especially like um we can model to the children, I think, on other ways. Like anybody can
Mhm.
be a creator. Everybody, we all can tap into that frequency of creativity.
Yeah.
And it is more about the process of creating rather than that
Mhm.
destination of what's your final product and is it
Yeah.
excellent? How polished is it?
Yeah.
So I think that's my kids have a YouTube channel inspired
Yeah.
by our Frequency Matters music.
Oh, very
They
cool.
they now have like my son has a YouTube channel for his hamster, and my
Nice.
daughter has one for our cat. I'm like, but they're like, it's a balance of like, how many likes do I get? And like,
Yeah.
if we measure our success based on those factors, it could always feel like, you put something out and then it kind of fizzles out. I got to put something else out there. So like,
Yeah.
how can you, I think just continuing to be in that creation mode of um, creating for yourself and for the process of creating,
Yeah.
or for me, I'm putting out a lot of like small sound healing bites, like
Mhm.
small snippets of a frequency or something.
Yeah.
And my intention is so that to help others.
Mm.
So but then it's like, it is this like uh it creeps up where it's like, I'm doing this to help others, even if I help one person, like it's worth it. But then it's like, how many views, how many
Yeah.
likes did I get? And
Yeah.
I still get caught up in that, just because it's like
Mhm.
that instant dopamine hit.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's impossible not to get caught up in it. And yeah, I, I'm trying to like brainstorm some kind of way. Like it would be strange that social media didn't, like if it didn't have likes. It somewhat feels like that's like the purpose of it. Like if there was just videos and you didn't see, because we inherently just as human, like we see when something's getting like more traction or more likes, and people are just more likely to like things that are being liked currently too. That's just like a very natural, I think,
Well, and
thing to
that's how
do.
the algorithms work too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
But I mean, we could talk about that topic all
Yeah.
day. But I
Yeah.
am curious, what are your goals as a producer and musician?
Yeah.
What are your
So
like future stuff?
totally. So currently what I'm doing for this year is it's a goal of mine to release a new track every single month. Um
Excellent.
Gonna be on track with that with as long as we get it out by late March. We have this song off to my mixing guy, and so he's working on it currently.
Cool.
Um but yeah, gonna do a song every single month. And I don't really have a lot of like hard stipulations on it has to be like a certain style or a certain way. Just that like I put myself through that process of finishing a song and what it takes to do that. Um, and then beyond that, I am just a spirit of collaborating with more people more. There's been more people in a local network that I'm collaborating with. And also there are people that I have met virtually on places like Instagram and things like that, that I'm trying to do actual tracks with.
Cool.
So, yeah. And also exploring the space. There's someone that I met online recently of sync licensing, which is basically licensing music for like film and TV and that kind of stuff, which is kind of a new venture because it's never something I thought I would really do. But I will say to any like artists and musicians out there, it seems like there's a lot of it that's going on that's needed that can kind of be like a financial way to support your art a little bit. I know that a lot of people kind of chase like Spotify and streaming, but from a logistical standpoint, you know, the price of what you're going to get paid for a song on Spotify versus if it's in like an indie movie or something like that. And you have to think too that these are things that are commercials that run all over the world and things like that. And, you know, there's the tiny, tiny bit of ethical, like, is it right to use music for these purposes in me? But I also feel like, you know, people are going to use it. It is what it is kind of thing. So I'm exploring that territory just a little bit. I will say I would like to maybe from a more artistic place get into like film and TV side of things over just like straight commercials and kind of stock music sort of things. Um, but yeah, I'm very much just open to creating and consistently creating, and then kind of always having materials that could go in various places. So I think I've really over the past 6 months or so, I've really refined like what it means to be disciplined and set time aside to work on things and finish things. And also in my own process, realize like, why is it when I'm like 80% done with the song, this feeling comes up? Or why is it when I release a song, this feeling comes up? So always trying to like gauge internally like these feelings and how most of them are generated around fear and things like that. And so really no like the main thing is consistency, like I was saying earlier. Like it's just created a whole idea of more consistent I am with it, the less anxious I am, the less I sit there thinking about what will it be like to release an album or a song about this. And the more that I just do a thing, then I'm like, I'm not in my head about it. So it's been, yeah, a lot more consistency and discipline for sure.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Cool. So I did want to mention that the intro to the Frequency Matters podcast,
Yeah.
this is going to be that first episode where we're going to use the intro that you
Awesome.
created.
Heck
So
yeah.
thank you so much for that. I'm so
Absolutely. Yeah.
excited. I think it sounds awesome.
Cool.
And is that something that you like? If other people listening to this podcast, if that's something that they're interested in, how can they get in touch with you? And is that something you want to do more of?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would say out of social media, Instagram is probably the best place, but also email. So yeah, if you want in the bottom of this episode, I can send you like my link tree and have some contact info there.
Yes, please.
But yeah, I love to honestly, it sounds strange, but I feel like I'm working better when I'm working on like 3 or 4 things at once versus just like one thing creatively. So I'm
That makes
definitely, yeah,
sense.
open to podcast intros and all that kind of stuff for sure.
Okay. What other kind of stuff is exciting to you to work on? I know you talked about collaborations, but what's the kind of person or skill set of
Hmm.
that would make somebody a good fit to working with you?
Yeah, someone that's just someone that is open, which most creative people inherently kind of are, but someone that is willing to have a good back and forth between working on something, discussing it, moving it further, discussing it. I feel like conversation is honestly like the greatest tool and strength with anybody in a creative domain, to just be able to consistently, not just like take something too far in one direction. And, it can be exciting. It can be exciting when you have this personal thing and you're like, oh, I got this idea. I know exactly how this is going to go. And then you feel that defeat when somebody else listens and they're like, oh, I don't know exactly if that's what I want. But I think that like there's so much learning in that. And through that process, I'm realizing like the more I can myself like have a handle on that, or like not get too far down the line before that communication. So yeah, someone skill set wise, I'm very open to people that are extremely experienced, people that aren't experienced, people that just have a vision and are willing to work through the necessary like struggles to get to the end goal. I think that like I'm open to that.
So podcast intros, musical collaborations, like sound engineering, like to help me understand, like in the future, what can you do to help this podcast be more professional? Or
Oh, totally. Yeah, I'm very open for podcasts, specifically for podcast intros, outros, music, transitioning, editing the audio for like clarity, and for removing ums and likes when it makes sense, because sometimes an or a like can enhance and sometimes it doesn't. Some people even too, I've been exploring the space of making various like sound effects and things. Some podcasts are very, very hyper and very like, they said this word and then this sound effect kind of came up. So all that kind of stuff, anything that has audio and in a podcast, I'm super open to working on it.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? I think we've got another less than a minute. So
yeah. No, I feel good on my end. I just want to say I appreciate you having me on, and for all the collaborations that we've done over the years. And I'm hoping that we'll have more in the future.
I fully agree, and thank you so much for your creativity, your flow, and for your presence and being open to whatever comes through and translating it in your unique way musically. And I look forward to more collaborations as well. Thanks again for being on the show. This concludes episode 3 of the Frequency Matters podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm your host, Kim Fendi. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And check out the links below to check out Nicholas's music, connect with him to collaborate, and also to listen to the music that he and I have created as Frequency Matters. Have a lovely and blessed day. Frequency matters. Frequency